Hey there, Paul David Thompson here. I'm a full-time real estate investor. I no longer depend on a day job, and I have a subscriber who sent me a question that I get quite a bit, so I thought I'd just record a video to jump right into the conversation of how to structure partnerships. Sometimes you don't have all the capital, you don't have all the money, and you want to find somebody else you can work with so you can team up and do a deal together that you wouldn't be able to do individually. And so the question here specifically is, I'm going to be doing shared deals with a partner where one of us brings the money and the other brings the deals and letting work. How would you suggest structuring that? Well, there's a lot of different ways to do it, and it's important to think about this on the front end because it can be kind of touchy to change it after the fact. So, how to structure? One of them is doing joint ventures. One of them is doing setting up an entity, like go into an LLC together or going into some sort of a trust together. And then the last one is debt partner, and I'll cover each of these in a little more detail and the way I would suggest doing this. In full disclosure here, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not giving you specific advice. I'm giving you some options and the pros and cons of each to figure out how this might work best in your situation. So seek appropriate legal counsel for your situation, but here these ideas can help you think of the right questions and go into it to the conversation prepared, armed with information. So first off, let's say you are an enterprising investor, you are able to get access to deals, but you don't have enough capital. So what are the options? Well, the default option most people go to is you want to go borrow the money. And that is what you call having a debt partner. That can be a bank, that can be a hard money lender, that can be private money. Any way of getting access to capital and they lend you the money, you rent the money from them and you pay an interest fee back to them, that's being a debt partner. And that is a completely appropriate, reasonable approach. It's actually very clean. What you get typically is you sign a promissory note saying that you promise to pay back the note, the loan, and then there's a mortgage which secures your interest in the property. So you have a property, and what the mortgage does is it basically attaches to this property as collateral. And so if you don't make your payments on the promissory note, then they can foreclose on you. And depending on what state you're in, this could be a deed of trust or a trust deed. It's a mortgage in my state. And it depends on your local jurisdiction. They're actually all pretty similar instruments, but underlyingly you're you're lending or you're borrowing money based on a promissory note, and somebody is lending you the money and you're buying the property and you hold title to it and you're making payments based on that. Okay, so that's kind of the simpler scenario. But what if you wanted to not borrow money and be a little smarter about this, and you wanted to use somebody else's partnership? So you could do a joint venture. And a joint venture is simply a document that spells out how you guys are going to split profits and losses depending on which one you get. So it cuts both ways. And you both basically share ownership of the property. And it can be split any way possible. It could be 50-50. It could be 70-30, or however you see fit. You can split up the debt, or you can split up the equity. You can split the equity, or you can split the cash flows, or both. It's just whatever is spelled out in the joint venture agreement. That's how you guys have agreed to go into it. And it's really important to go into that transaction on the front end, planning for if something doesn't go to plan. If you have problems, how are you going to exit the deal and still maintain a relationship, a friendship with your partner? Now, the other way I like to do it is with an LLC or entity. And this is typically a longer term. The JV is done typically on a per transaction basis or a per deal basis. Whereas an LLC or an entity, oftentimes, especially an LLC, is done on an ongoing basis. So say you and a buddy want to go buy 20, 30, 40 rental properties. Well, the way you do that is you basically have it set up so that you're taking title to the property in your LLC. So you have a property and it's titled in the LLC. And then inside your LLCs, you have different members. And so you're member 1 and your buddy is member 2. So each of you share in both the gains and the losses of this transaction, but then you can keep buying new properties and keep titling it in this LLC. And so each one of these point to this LLC, and you each have this. What's nice about that is that on the front end, you make some decisions, and then you go and like repeat the same transaction or similar transactions over and over again, and you don't have to reset up the operating agreement or the members agreement each time. However, the drawback of this is if it goes sour, then you both own all of these properties together. And say one person decides to change their circumstances and they want to figure out how to get out of it. How do you exit out of the LLC? Well, you have to either buy him out, him or her out, or you have to figure out some way to structure the transaction so that you can equally or appropriately negotiate how to split everything out, which still happens with the JV, but it's on a per deal basis, so there's a lot less to deal with. It's only one transaction. I prefer to do the joint venture on a one-off basis. Do that 2, 3, 4, 5 times. And if you really have a good working relationship and you really want to build a business on the long term with this one-off transaction, then go to the LLC route, because then you're okay. We have established ourselves as a good working relationship. Go with the LLC, and then you can kind of scale your business. But if you're first getting started, I really like just doing a joint venture. And you can do a joint venture in a lot of ways. And you can still have LLCs involved because you like to have the liability protection of LLC. So say you decide to buy a house together. One person brings the money, so you have your money partner, and then you have you who is doing all the work. And so what you do is you set up a joint venture agreement. And that joint venture agreement spells out how you are splitting everything. You bring the money, you bring the work, or you bring the deal. And then you agree on how the payments are going to be made. Is it going to be 50-50, 70-30, 90-10? You work that out. There's no right or wrong way to do that, so long as you're doing it the same way, consistently, within this joint venture agreement. Whatever you agree to, make sure and follow through. That's what you're going to do. So, but you can still have entities. So what you can do is you can still have this titled in an LLC, or better yet, titled in a trust. And within that trust, you have 2 beneficiaries, one being the Money Partners LLC, and the other one being your LLC. So this is the Money LLC, and this is your LLC. So LLC 1 has 50% interest in this trust, and this LLC has 50% interest in this trust, and there is a trust agreement, a beneficiaries agreement, that describes how you guys are going to split things out and how you're going to run things. And then that trust, the trustee of this trust, is actually who owns title. And that's the way I like to do things. I like to have a trust. This is what we refer to as a land trust. There'll be another video on that later on. But the land trust owns title to this, and actually the trustee of this land trust has title to this property, whatever it is. And then each of these beneficiaries are spelled out in the trust agreement that says that you have 50% and your partner has 50%. And then now you can go do a deal. And if you want to go and do this at scale, you can buy tons more properties doing this at scale. And each time you do a new property, then this is titled in a new trust. So now there's a land trust set up right here for every property. And each one of these land trusts specifies the same split, or maybe say this time you bring money to the table and somebody else brings. So now you might have LLC 1 brings, say, 5K, and then somebody's IRA brings money to the table. Again, this is a trustee. So now your IRA or somebody else's IRA may bring, say, $50,000, and you bring $5,000, and you guys are into this, but you agree to split it, again, however you see fit. It doesn't have to be proportionate to the allocation. It has to be whatever you two agree to. And this is a nice way for an IRA to get a passive transaction or passive payments for money they put into it, but they effectively own title. They control the property, and now you can sell the beneficial interest of this land trust to somebody else if you want to. You can sell it to another investor, or you can sell it to another LLC. You can sell it to another owner-occupant who wants to buy the property and live in it. So this is just scratching the surface of different ways that you can set up deals. But this is one way I like to start off when you're first getting started. Once you get your head around how to do a land trust, it actually isn't that hard. It isn't expensive. And that way you only need to have one LLC, your LLC, which is doing your transactions, or somebody else's IRA who is working with you and they're being your money partner and you're doing all the work. That's the way I like to start a lot of transactions for somebody who's just getting started, and they're bringing in a third-party member who doesn't want to just be a debt partner. They actually want to have some of the equity play, and you do the work, but they bring the money. And that is a few ways on how to structure partnerships. This is Paul David Thompson. If you want to hear more about how I do deals like this, you can listen to my podcast, Ready Investor One, or comment down below. How are you setting up your transactions? What kind of deal structuring do you do? And what questions do you have? I'm looking forward to answering them.